for letting me speak again. When Arden asked me to speak at your 2010 relay, it gave me a chance to reflect. Before I tell my story, I wanted to thank everyone in the room for participating in such a great event. As you guys enter adulthood, hopefully you've learned that knowledge is power. I have two messages for you tonight. The first is to know your own body. Cancer can strike at any age, at any time. And with awareness of your body, hopefully you'll be more inclined to explore if something feels different. Number two, do not go one day without medical insurance. And I am saying this not I'm taking the politics and the opinions out of this. This is just a message, and it's just absolutely the truth. In the short video I prepared after I speak to you guys, you'll hear from women who are friends of mine who have all had cancer. And they were all aware enough of their own bodies to discover cancer early enough to be treated, after which we're all able to go back to our everyday lives. The resources available to all of us, such as yearly gynecology exams, mammograms, starting at the appropriate old age of 35 or 40. For most of you, even regular doctor's appointments gives us all the best advantage in the fight against cancer. It goes without saying that those with medical coverage are more likely to go to the doctor for preventative purposes, thereby catching things early. Prevention is knowledge. Knowledge is power, and that power can save your life. And that is it for my preaching, I promise. And as I have grown comfortable over the years, as Arden told you, telling my story, I am painfully aware that there isn't a person in this room who hasn't been affected by cancer in some way. Everyone has a story, and this is mine. I was raised by a mother who had cancer. That's my mother, and that's all of us. That was a year before my mother became sick. So in late 2003, 4 years after giving birth to my youngest child, Allison, I began my own journey as a mother of 4 kids faced with cancer. The irony of me getting cancer is not lost on anyone, especially my husband and my children. Lynn Witheford was a beautiful and athletic mother to Derek, 6, Arden, 5, and Shelby, who was only 2 years old, when she lost her life at the age of 35, 5 days after she was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of breast cancer. As you will see by the photographs in the video that I've prepared for you, she was young, she was beautiful, and she loved her family more than anything. And though I have raised Arden since she was only 7 years old, it was her mother who gave her the characteristics that best describe her. Strong, compassionate, and honest, and apparently a fabulous eater. Congratulations, Arden. And her loud voice, I'm sorry to say, probably has come from me. A mother's job is to give her kids all the things that they grow up that they need to grow into great adults, and sometimes those gifts come in death. I wish my kids had their mother till they were in their 40s like I did, but due to cruel fate that took Lynn at such an early age, all I can do for them is love them and live for them. And that's what I do. I live. It was my mother who taught me how to live life to its fullest when dealt with unmentionable adversity. In 1966, less than 50 years ago, my mother was 33 years old with a husband and 3 small children when she learned that she had melanoma in her left arm. At that time, there was no known treatment for this type of cancer. After weeks of doctor's visits and second opinions, my parents agreed to the extreme measure of allowing the doctors to amputate her arm, her breast, and her shoulder. The doctor told my mother that the surgery would postpone her death, but not to expect to see the age of 40. They were sent home with the advice to get their house in order, and in other words, prepare our family for a life without her. By the 4th day of my mom's return from the hospital, she basically switched roles with the nurse that came home with her, serving her tea and telling her to sit down and relax. It was at that moment now that I'm old enough to understand that I witnessed pure strength and a will that would last my mother a lifetime. She had a prosthetic arm that looked very real. She had jewelry and fingernails and everything. My whole life I would reach for her fake hand, squeeze it and ask her if she felt it. And she was always amused by that question, and she always smiled and looked at me and said no. My kids like the story of when I would bring my friends to my mom's closet, grab her fake arm, and chase her around the house. That was the one game I shared with my little sister. My mom did everything other moms did. She drove a car, sometimes scaring my friends by applying lipstick and steering with her knee. She taught us to drive, sometimes without screaming at us. She cooked, and she made fabulous dinner reservations. There was one thing that maybe other one-arm moms didn't do. My mom played golf almost every day of her life. She loved to play golf with her friends, pinning her extra shirt sleeve up on her shoulder so it didn't flap in the wind. In fact, my dad told us shortly after my mom died that she was just learning how to play golf before she got sick. 6 months after she died, she came home from the hospital. My parents were going out to an event, but my mom came downstairs with her black hair, her blue eyes, and her pretty dress. She looked at my dad and said, matter of fact, when can I start to play golf again? And my dad realized then that she was going to be okay. Not discussing her cancer unless asked. My mom didn't want cancer to be what defined her. My own skewed and perhaps naive view of cancer came from my mom, who carried herself with such a quiet grace, always ready to help those in need without really wanting any help from others. In 1985, 20 years after her initial surgery, right around the time when my sister was getting married, my mom noticed that her stomach was getting extremely large. Not wanting to ruin her big day, she didn't tell anyone, even my father, until after the wedding. The doctor discovered a large tumor the size of a softball in her uterus. Because she had waited so long, and this is the only time when it's good to wait, they noticed they were able to, when they took out that tumor, they were able to find a malignant tumor in her kidney. And if she had said something sooner, that tumor might have been too small for anybody to notice, and we might have a very different story today. This time, the cancer was a deadly form of sarcoma that was rare and with almost no history of sustained survival. My parents found a cancer doctor in New York who was so fascinated that my mother was still alive that he decided to take her on as a patient. She underwent intensive care chemotherapy, which was fairly new at that time, with no drugs to ease the pain. Needless to say, we thought that if the cancer didn't kill her, that the chemotherapy definitely would. Every 2 weeks, hospitalized and weak, my mother would lay in the hospital bed and we just sat with her quietly. There was really nothing else that we could do. As sick as my mom was during this time, she managed still to wrestle me with the car keys so she could drive herself to the hospital. 10 years later, late November of 1996, my mom was 66 years old, and my personal life was about to take an incredible turn. I met my husband, Jeff, at a party. After dating for a few months, he introduced me to his children. When Jeff picked me up in my apartment, the kids were waiting in a row on the sidewalk in front of his puke-colored minivan. It was like a commercial with adorable children in their very ugly car. I was really nervous, and I thought to myself, what am I doing? What could I possibly bring to this man and all of these children? I brought them each a Beanie Baby, which was the rage at the time, and Bones the dog that already got that first night is still sitting on her bed at home. When we got married in April 1998, Arden and Shelby were my bridesmaids. Derek was Jeff's best man. It was the beginning of a new life for all of us. We moved to Boston in August of 1999, right after Allison was born. 2 years later, in 2001, I got a phone call from my sister that my mom's cancer had returned. This time it was in her right breast. Her treatment would be radiation and a milder form of chemo. Though she was okay for about a year after that, it started to spread, and by mid-2003 it was clear to all of us that she wouldn't be beating cancer this time. When you grow up with cancer like my family did, humor becomes the way that you cope. My sister and I would talk very matter of fact, about which one of us would get cancer first. And I found out in November of 2003 that it was going to be me. My doctor felt something that he said should be looked at right away, not to worry. It was probably nothing, which they always say is usually the case. After 2 hours of mammograms and waiting, I had an ultrasound showing a dark spot in one particular area, and even though I'm not a doctor, even I could tell that there was something there. After what seemed like an eternity, the radiologist came in and told me that there was a 95% chance that I had breast cancer. And normally, as maybe some of you can imagine, I enjoy very directness, but at that point I just put my hands over my eyes and I cried. When I first met Jeff, he had serious concerns about getting involved with me based on my own family medical history, and with his worst fears now coming true. After being robbed of the chance to help his first wife, he supported me in every way he could. Once we got through the first week of unknowns, such as doctors, where and what treatment, my husband approached his role as my father did for my mother, taking care of things and being totally present for me. He came to every appointment, which ironically was at the same clinic we brought my mother 1 year before for a second opinion. It seemed unimaginable to us to have to tell our children that I had cancer. The hospital armed us with backpacks filled with toys and cancer pamphlets, but really, they didn't need any of that. All they needed was for us to tell them that it would be okay. We were so proud of their bravery that day and every day after that, having to watch me battle a disease their mother never had an opportunity to fight. After we told the kids, I called my mom, who was already in her last stages of her own breast cancer. I tried to honor her in her last, she listened and then simply reminded me through her tears that she had taught me all my life what to do. I tried to honor her in her last months by going through my year of hell with as little drama as possible. Since I grew up thinking that cancer was something to beat, the worst thing for me was the loss of my hair. I learned I had a very small head, which was very strange since everyone would think I have a very big head. And I got a fabulous wig, and my husband used it many times later over the years as his Halloween costume. I was able to function pretty well during my treatment with my friends and my neighbors filling in when I couldn't, and I'm very proud to say that people who didn't know me didn't know that I had cancer. My mother died on April 12, 2004, 40 years after her original diagnosis and one week before my final chemotherapy treatment was to take place. Even in my mother's death, my mother's lessons of how to live a good life helped me hurry up and recover from the ravages of the treatment that I endured. It is her spirit that continues to be what makes me strong and so hopeful for others faced with cancer. I hope I can pass this on to my children so that they can use their strength during their lifetime. So that's my story. My early diagnosis and aggressive treatment was possible because of the endless research by dedicated doctors and scientists who are trying to eradicate breast cancer in our lifetime. Though there are still too many stories that do not have such a happy ending as mine, as my own children know too well. What you're doing here tonight, raising money and cancer awareness with this Relay for Life, and other cancer funds you support, leads to improving new cancer patients' odds of having a longer and healthier life. People say that a positive attitude is what makes all the difference in the treatment of cancer. And though that may have been a big part of my recovery, I know in my heart, and so did my mother, that the doctors and researchers, that we have those people to thank for extending and improving our lives. I am a mother with cancer, who was raised by a mother with cancer, and I'm raising kids whose own mother died of cancer. May my children live in a time where that chain is finally broken without forgetting what it took to get them there. And so, with that, I would love to share with you this video, which basically gives voice to some of my friends' personal experiences, as well as showing you the many faces of cancer, some of which you might recognize. Thank you.